The snow did not come down like weather that night. It came down like judgment. By the time Caleb Whitaker found the Apache woman near his horse barn, the whole valley had vanished beneath a white, breathless silence, and every fence post on his land looked like a grave marker. She was lying half against the north rail, one hand closed around a small leather pouch, her dark hair stiff with frost, her dress dusted white from shoulder to hem. For a long moment, Caleb stood there with the lantern in his hand and the wind biting through his coat, knowing exactly what the town of Mercy Crossing would say if they learned who he had dragged under his roof. Apache trouble. Savage business. Not your fight. He had heard those words for years, spoken over coffee, over cards, over courthouse steps, always by men who liked justice best when it looked like themselves. The woman moved then, barely, just enough for the lantern light to catch her face. She was not asking him for anything. That was what made it worse. Folks who begged could be turned away. Folks who stayed silent left a man alone with himself. Caleb set the lantern on a fence post, pulled off his gloves, and lifted her as carefully as a man lifting something already broken by the world but not yet surrendered to it. She was light from hunger, cold from distance, and stubborn even while senseless, because her fingers would not release that pouch. "All right," he muttered into the storm. "Keep your secrets, then." His cabin sat 200 yards from the barn, but that walk felt longer than any trail he had taken as a young scout riding ahead of soldiers he no longer cared to remember. Snow struck his face sideways. The horses stamped in the dark. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a coyote gave one thin cry and then thought better of it. Caleb kicked open the cabin door with his heel and carried her inside where the fire had burned low and orange. The place had been built for one man who expected nothing from the world except hard mornings and quiet nights. One chair, one cot, one tin cup hanging beside the stove, one plate on the shelf. No pictures on the wall, because pictures had a way of asking questions. He laid her on the cot, took the blanket from his own shoulders, and tucked it around her without touching more than he had to. Her eyelids fluttered. A small knife slid from her sleeve and landed soft on the quilt between them. Caleb saw it. She saw that he saw it. Neither of them reached. Her eyes opened fully then, dark and steady despite the fever glaze of cold. Not frightened exactly. Measuring, like she had learned long ago that a roof could be more dangerous than the sky. Caleb stepped back to the stove, poured hot coffee into his only tin cup, cooled it with a splash of water, and set it on the floor near the cot where she could take it or leave it. "Storms lock the pass," he said. "No horse makes it through before morning. Maybe longer." She watched him with that same silent suspicion, one hand still gripping the pouch beneath the blanket. Outside, the wind pressed its face against the cabin walls. Caleb looked at the door, then at the woman, then at the empty hook where his cup had always hung alone. "Stay till the snow clears," he said. And the moment the words left his mouth, he felt the old cabin change, as if the fire had heard him make room for another life. Ayanna Black Moon did not sleep like a woman resting under a stranger's mercy. She slept in broken pieces, one eye opening whenever the fire snapped, whenever the wind leaned hard against the shutters, whenever Caleb Whitaker crossed the room with slow, careful steps that made the floorboards complain beneath his boots. By dawn, the storm had thickened until the windows were nothing but pale squares of moving white. The world outside had no road, no ridge, no sky, only snow. Caleb woke in the chair with his hat tipped low and his coat still on, the rifle across his knees, but his hand nowhere near the trigger. Ayanna noticed that first. Men who wanted to frighten, you made sure you saw the weapon. Men who were tired of frightening people forgot they were holding one. She sat up too quickly, and pain crossed her face before she could hide it. Caleb saw that too, but he did not step toward her. He only nodded at the stove. "Coffee's warm. Bread's hard. Best I can offer before the hens forgive the weather." She looked at the tin cup on the floor where he had left it hours before. The coffee had gone cold, untouched. Her fingers moved beneath the blanket, checking the leather pouch. Still there. Still sealed. Still worth more trouble than any sane woman would carry through a mountain storm. "You live alone," she said at last. Her English was careful, each word placed like a stone across thin ice. Caleb took the rifle from his knees and leaned it against the wall, far enough from his chair that reaching it would not be easy. Most folks do, one way or another. That answer seemed to irritate her. Or maybe it only made her listen harder. She glanced around the cabin. One plate, one spoon, a shaving mirror clouded with age, a pair of socks drying near the stove. No woman's things. No child's boots. No Bible open on the table. Nothing soft except the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You are not afraid of me?" she asked. Caleb gave a dry breath that was almost a laugh, but had no happiness in it. "Ma'am, last night you could barely hold your head up, and you still had a knife ready. I would say afraid is not the right word, but foolish is not either." For the first time, something shifted in her eyes. Not trust. Not yet. Only the smallest crack in the wall. He rose and cut a piece of bread with his belt knife, set it on the table, and pushed the whole plate toward her before taking any for himself. She watched the gesture as if it was a trick. "Eat or do not," he said. "Either way, I am feeding the horses." He opened the door, and the storm struck the room like a thrown sheet. Snow swirled around his legs. Before stepping out, he paused, glanced back at the tin cup hanging empty beside the stove, then took a second battered cup from a high shelf, one so old it had gone dark at the rim. He rinsed it, filled both cups with coffee, and left hers steaming on the table. When Caleb returned from the barn, his beard was white with frost. Ayanna had moved to the chair, wrapped in the blanket, the untouched bread still before her. But the coffee was gone. So was the knife from the quilt. He noticed without letting his eyes linger. Outside, the horses stamped nervously, and not from weather alone. Caleb went still. Through the wind came another sound, low and distant, almost swallowed by snow. Harness bells. More than one horse. Ayanna heard it too. Her hand closed around the pouch. Caleb looked toward the white window, and the old quiet inside him hardened. Someone had found his road in a storm no honest traveler should have crossed. The bells came closer, soft and wrong beneath the roar of the storm. Caleb Whitaker stood between the table and the door, listening with the kind of stillness that made even the fire seem cautious. Ayanna had risen from the chair, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, her face calm, but her fingers locked around the leather pouch as if it held the last warm thing in the world. "Who is it?" she asked. Caleb did not answer at first. He moved to the window and wiped frost from the glass with his sleeve. 3 riders appeared through the white curtain, shapes without faces, coming slow from the south trail. No traveler came that way unless he already knew where he meant to stop. The first horse carried a man in a long dark coat with a fur collar dusted white. Silas Crow. Caleb knew him by the polished saddle before he knew the face. Men like Silas kept their leather cleaner than their conscience. Behind him rode Sheriff Amos Bell, narrow-shouldered and uneasy, and Harlan Pike, the storekeeper who sold flour by the pound and rumors by the handful. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Town business," he said. "That means trouble dressed proper." Ayanna stepped away from the window. "They followed me. Maybe. You should tell them I left." Caleb looked at the floor, where 2 sets of wet tracks crossed each other near the stove. "Storm took your footprints." "Cabin did not." The riders stopped 20 feet from the porch. Silas dismounted first, smiling before his boots even met the snow. He had a handsome face if a man did not look too long at the eyes. Sheriff Bell stayed on his horse, hat brim low, ashamed before anyone accused him of anything. Harlan Pike hugged his coat shut and stared at the cabin like fear had made him curious. Caleb opened the door only halfway. Cold pushed in hard enough to bend the candle flame. "You boys lost." Silas glanced past him, trying to see inside. "Morning, Caleb. Bad weather for secrets. Bad weather for visiting, too." Silas smiled wider. "We are looking for an Apache woman. Dark hair. Traveling alone. Dangerous sort, according to what was found down by the medicine road." The words entered the cabin and settled there. Ayanna did not move, but Caleb felt her silence change. "Dangerous how?" he asked. Sheriff Bell cleared his throat. "A courier from Fort Laramie was found dead near Crow Creek yesterday morning. Medicine shipment gone. Witness trail led north." Caleb kept his face empty. Snow makes poor witnesses. Silas removed one glove finger by finger, as if the cold had no claim on him. This one left signs before the snow came. Small moccasin prints. Blood on the brush. A torn strip of blue cloth. Ayanna looked down at the faint blue edge of her sleeve. Caleb noticed. So did Silas. His eyes sharpened through the crack in the door. "You have company, Whitaker?" The cabin went quiet enough to hear snow tapping the brim of Caleb's hat. For one breath, Ayanna looked ready to run, though there was nowhere to go but into white emptiness and men waiting beyond it. Caleb opened the door a few inches wider, not enough for them to see her fully, enough for his body to fill the frame. No one gets dragged out of my house in a storm. Harlan Pike made a nervous sound. Sheriff Bell looked away. Silas stopped smiling. That woman is wanted. Then bring a warrant when the road is open. You protecting her? Caleb's eyes did not change. I am protecting my threshold. The words landed heavier than a threat because they were not one. Silas looked past him again, and this time his gaze caught the small leather pouch beneath Ayanna's hand. Something ugly flickered across his face, quick as a match in wind. Then it was gone. He put his glove back on and stepped away from the porch. Snow clears soon, he said. When it does, Mercy Crossing will want answers. Caleb closed the door slowly. Behind him, Ayanna whispered, He did not come for me. Caleb turned. Her eyes were fixed on the pouch. He came for this. By noon, the storm had softened into a slow white fall, but the cold inside Caleb Whitaker's cabin had changed shape. It was no longer the cold of winter. It was the cold of things unsaid. Ayanna Black Moon sat near the stove with the leather pouch in her lap, her thumb moving across the seal as if reading a prayer written for her hands alone. Caleb stood at the window, watching the three riders become faint marks on the south trail until the snow swallowed them. He knew Silas Crow well enough to understand that leaving quietly was not the same as letting go. Men like Silas did not quit a thing because it was right. They quit only when they had found a better way to take it. Open it, Caleb said. Ayanna looked up. You have no right to ask. No, he said, but I have a right to know what brought trouble to my door. She studied him for a long moment, then lowered her gaze to the pouch. Her fingers hesitated only once before she broke the cord. Inside were three things: a folded army receipt, a small bundle of dried leaves tied with red thread, and a strip of dark leather stamped with a silver mark. Caleb did not move until he saw the mark. Then something in his face went still in a way that made Ayanna notice. You know it, she said. Caleb took the leather strip carefully, not like evidence, but like a ghost. Quartermaster seal from the old supply line. I saw it years ago. With soldiers? With men who wore uniforms, he said. That was not always the same thing. The fire clicked softly. Ayanna unfolded the receipt and held it toward him. Medicine was meant for families near Willow Creek. Children, elders, white families and Apache families both, if anyone had the courage to share it. Caleb read the paper slowly. His eyes moved over the names, the dates, the promised crates of fever tonic and winter salve. Then he saw Silas Crow's signature at the bottom as local carrier. A signature neat as a church hymn and twice as false. He changed the shipment, Ayanna said. Cheap bottles. Colored water. Powder that made the sick weaker. My mother found out when 2 children from our camp did not get better. Caleb set the paper on the table. Your mother is a healer. Ayanna nodded. She sent me to follow the medicine road. I found the courier alive enough to speak. He said Silas took the real medicine to sell in Cheyenne, then left the false crates for both our people and yours. Her voice did not rise. That made the words heavier. He gave me that strip from Silas's saddlebag before he passed into the spirit road. I took what proof I could carry. Then the storm came. Caleb looked at the old cup beside her hand, the cup she had finally used, and felt shame move through him with the patience of deep water. Mercy Crossing has sick children, he said. Ayanna's eyes sharpened. How many? For last I heard. Maybe more by now. She stood too fast and caught the edge of the table. Caleb reached out, then stopped before touching her. She saw the restraint. This time, she did not step away. I can help, she said. With those leaves? With those leaves, if your town can swallow its pride long enough to drink what an Apache woman gives them. Caleb looked toward the south window where the road lay buried under snow and lies. He thought of Sheriff Bell's lowered eyes. Harlan Pike's fear. Silas Crow's smile when he saw the pouch. Then he took the second tin cup from the table, filled it with hot water, and placed it in front of her. Tell me what you need. Ayanna looked at the cup, then at him. For the first time since he had found her by the barn, she seemed less like a woman ready to flee and more like someone deciding whether a stranger could become a witness. Outside, the wind began to fall quiet, and somewhere under all that snow, the road to Mercy Crossing waited. By late afternoon, Caleb Whitaker had Mercy Crossing standing inside his cabin without inviting a single soul through the door. He could feel the town in every thought, every hesitation, every hard breath he took, while Ayanna Black Moon crushed dried leaves with the handle of his coffee spoon. Outside, the snow had slowed to a fine powder that drifted sideways over the yard. Inside, the stove hissed, the kettle breathed, and the small table between them had become something like an altar. The leather pouch lay open beside the army receipt. The strip of stamped leather sat near the lamp. 2 tin cups stood close together, one bright from years of use, the other dark at the rim from years of being forgotten, on a high shelf. Ayanna worked with steady hands. She measured the leaves, added a pinch of gray root from a folded cloth tucked inside her dress pocket, then poured hot water over the mixture until the cabin filled with a scent of sage, bitter bark, and rain on warm stone. Caleb watched without speaking. He had seen doctors in frock coats carry themselves like kings and do less with more. She noticed him watching. "Medicine is not magic," she said. "It only helps the body remember how to fight." Caleb looked down at the cup. "Some folks in town will call it poison before they let it save them. Then they are already sick in a place my herbs cannot reach." The words were quiet, not cruel. That made them true. Before Caleb could answer, hooves sounded again, slower this time, heavier with worry than threat. He stepped to the window and saw a wagon coming through the drifts, Sheriff Bell walking beside it with his head bowed against the wind. Harlan Pike rode behind, and in the wagon sat a woman Caleb recognized from town, Martha Ellison, wrapped in a brown shawl, holding a little boy against her chest. The child's face was pale beneath a knitted cap. His eyes were open but dull, fixed on nothing. Ayanna stood at once. Caleb opened the door before anyone knocked. Martha looked past him and saw the Apache woman by the stove. Her arms tightened around the boy. Fear came first, then shame, then the kind of desperation that lowers every fence a person ever built. "Sheriff said she might know fever medicine," Martha whispered. No one mentioned the accusation. No one mentioned the crowd that would talk later. The boy coughed softly, and that small sound settled the matter better than any argument could. Caleb stepped aside. "Bring him in." Martha hesitated at the threshold. Ayanna did not ask for trust. She only picked up the lighter tin cup, poured the bitter tea, and set it on the table where the mother could see both her hands. "Small sips," she said. "Not fast. Keep him warm. No spirits. No more of the blue bottle from Crow's store." Harlan Pike stiffened. Sheriff Bell looked at him. Caleb saw it, that tiny crack in the wall. "Blue bottle?" the sheriff asked. Martha's eyes filled with sudden fear. "Silas sold it to half the town." Ayanna looked at Caleb, and neither of them needed to speak. The false medicine was not just a secret on paper anymore. It was sitting in the lungs of children, in the cupboards of frightened mothers, in the silence of men who had looked away too long. The boy took one sip, made a face at the bitterness, then swallowed another because his mother begged him softly. A few minutes passed. The cabin held its breath. Then the child's eyes shifted, found the stove, found the woman beside it, and in a small, cracked voice he said, "The man with the black gloves changed the crate." Harlan Pike went pale. Sheriff Bell slowly turned toward the road to town. Caleb looked at the 2 tin cups on the table. One had always been enough for loneliness. It was not enough for justice. The child's words did not shout. They did not need to. They moved through Caleb Whitaker's cabin the way a lantern moves through fog, showing shapes that had been there all along. Sheriff Amos Bell stood with his hat in both hands, staring at the floor as if the boards might offer him a kinder version of the truth. Harlan Pike sat down hard on the edge of the wood box, his face the color of old flour. Martha Ellison kept one hand on her son's forehead and the other wrapped around the tin cup, holding it now like something holy. Ayanna Black Moon said nothing. She only watched the boy breathe, counting each breath with the patience of someone who had learned that healing was mostly waiting without surrender. Caleb took the army receipt from the table and laid the stamped leather strip beside it. "Sheriff," he said, "how many families bought Crow's bottles?" Bell swallowed. "Most of them. White families." "Yes." Caleb looked at Ayanna. "Apache families, too?" Her answer was quiet. "Some traded blankets for it. Some gave horses." The sheriff closed his eyes. A man could hide from one wrong thing for a while, maybe 2. But when the wrong thing had children on both sides of the valley coughing under the same winter roof, hiding began to look a lot like choosing. Bell opened his eyes again, and for the first time since Caleb had known him, the weakness in the man seemed tired of itself. I need that proof, he said. Ayanna's hand moved over the pouch. Caleb saw the old fear cross her face. Evidence had a way of disappearing when carried by the wrong hands. Especially evidence that made respected men look small. Sheriff Bell understood the look. It wounded him, but not unfairly. I gave you no reason to trust me, he said. That is the first honest thing you have said today, Ayanna answered. No one smiled. The fire cracked once, sharp as a word cut short. Caleb reached for the receipt, but instead of handing it to Bell, he placed it in Martha Ellison's lap. The room went still. Martha looked up, startled. Me? You are a mother with a sick boy, Caleb said. If Silas calls this Indian lies, you hold the paper. If he calls me a bitter old scout, you hold the paper. Let him tell this town you do not know what medicine cost you. Martha stared at the signature at the bottom, then folded the receipt with trembling care and tucked it inside her shawl. Ayanna watched Caleb then, not like a woman studying danger, but like someone seeing a door where she had expected another wall. Harlan Pike wiped his mouth with the back of his glove. There are crates in my storehouse, he said. Silas told me not to open them until the thaw. Sheriff Bell turned slowly. What crates? Harlan could not meet anyone's eyes. Marked as lamp oil. Heavy for oil. Caleb felt the old scout in him wake, not the part that followed orders, but the part that knew when tracks did not match the story. How far to town in this snow? Bell said, 5 miles. Maybe 6 the way the road drifted. Ayanna rose and reached for her shawl. Caleb looked at her. You are not riding into that town with them staring holes through you. She tied the pouch closed. Children are there. So is Silas. Then both truths are waiting. The simple courage of it left no room for argument. Caleb took his coat from the peg and wrapped his scarf around his neck. Then he lifted the darker tin cup, rinsed it, and placed it in his saddlebag beside the herbs she had prepared. Ayanna noticed. You are bringing that. Caleb buckled the bag. 1 cup will not be enough. Outside, the snow had nearly stopped. The clouds hung low and bruised over the valley. As they stepped onto the porch, distant riders appeared along the ridge to the east, too far to name, too many to ignore. Sheriff Bell reached for his reins. Harlan whispered, Is that Crow? Ayanna narrowed her eyes at the moving shapes against the pale sky. No, she said softly. Those are my people. The riders on the eastern ridge did not descend like a war party. They came slow, single file through the thinning snow, their horses stepping carefully where the drifts hid stone and ice. There were 12 of them at first glance, then more shapes behind the low pines, quiet enough to make the whole valley seem to hold its breath. Caleb Whitaker stood on his porch with one hand resting on the saddlebag that held Ayanna Black Moon's herbs and the darker tin cup. Sheriff Bell stood beside the wagon, not reaching for his sidearm, not because he was brave, but because for once he understood that fear was no kind of law. Martha Ellison pulled her boy close, though the child was sitting straighter now, color returning faintly to his cheeks. Harlan Pike looked ready to apologize to every tree in the yard if it might spare him from being noticed. Ayanna stepped forward until the snow touched the hem of her dress. One of the riders dismounted before the others. She was an older Apache woman with silver in her braids and a deerskin coat lined with rabbit fur. Her face was weathered, calm, and unreadable in the way mountains are unreadable. Ayanna's breath caught. Mother! The woman crossed the yard without hurry and stopped an arm's length away from her daughter. She did not embrace her at first. She looked at the fading bruise of cold on Ayanna's face, the weariness in her shoulders, the leather pouch at her waist. Then she placed one hand against Ayanna's cheek. The storm kept you, she said in English, slow but clear. Ayanna looked toward Caleb. Not only the storm. The older woman followed her gaze. Caleb removed his hat. He did not bow. He did not smile. He only stood bareheaded in the cold because respect, if it was real, did not need decoration. Ma'am, he said. Name is Caleb Whitaker. I am Taza Black Moon, she answered. Her eyes moved to the wagon, to the sheriff, to the storekeeper, and last to Martha's child. The fever came here too. Martha nodded, ashamed and grateful in the same breath. Taza looked at Ayanna. You gave them medicine? I gave what I had. And they accepted it. Ayanna's mouth tightened, almost a smile. Some did after the child spoke. Sheriff Bell stepped forward, holding his hat against his chest. Mrs. Black Moon, I aim to take Silas Crow into custody and open the crates in town. I will need witnesses. Taza studied him until the sheriff's eyes lowered. Your law walks late. Bell swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Then make it walk straight. No one answered. There was nothing to add to a truth that plain. Caleb led his horse from the barn and helped fasten the saddlebag. Ayanna moved beside him, checking the herbs, her fingers brushing the tin cup as though she understood why he had packed it. You could stay here, he said quietly. Your people found you. She did not look up. The sick are still in Mercy Crossing. That town does not deserve you. Sickness does not wait for deserving. The words struck him softer than blame and deeper than praise. Together they rode toward town with the wagon between them and the Apache riders spread behind, not as threat, not as spectacle, but as witnesses under a clearing sky. By the time they reached Mercy Crossing, the street had filled with townspeople wrapped in coats and suspicion. Silas Crow stood on the store porch in black gloves, watching them arrive. He smiled when he saw the sheriff. He stopped smiling when he saw Martha Ellison step down from the wagon with the army receipt in her hand. Mercy Crossing had never looked smaller than it did beneath that pale winter sky. The whole town stood in the street with snow packed along the boardwalks and chimney smoke hanging low over the roofs. Every face turned toward Caleb Whitaker, Ayanna Black Moon, Sheriff Bell, Martha Ellison, and the quiet Apache riders who waited beyond the hitching posts. No one shouted at first. That was the mercy of truth arriving before rumor could put its boots on. Silas Crow stood on the store porch with his black gloves folded around the railing, calm as Sunday morning. Sheriff, he called, you bring a crowd for a sick town or a circus? Sheriff Bell climbed the steps slowly. His badge looked dull in the flat light. Open your storehouse, Silas. On what charge? Fraud. Theft. Endangering families under my protection. A murmur moved through the street. Silas laughed once, soft and polished. Big words for a man following an Apache woman and an old scout with grudges. Caleb did not move. Ayanna stood beside the wagon, her mother behind her, the pouch held in both hands. Silas pointed at her without looking directly at her face. That is your witness? Her. Martha Ellison stepped forward then. Small woman. Brown shawl. Tired eyes. A child's hand holding hers. She unfolded the army receipt with fingers that still shook, but her voice did not. This has your name on it, Mr. Crow. It says the real medicine was placed in your care. Silas's smile thinned. Most women do not understand supply papers. Martha looked up at him. Most mothers understand when their child gets worse from a bottle you sold. The street went quiet. Harlan Pike came next, carrying a wooden crate from the side room of his own store, shame making him look older than he had that morning. He told me they were lamp oil, Harlan said. Told me not to touch them until the thaw. Sheriff Bell pried the lid open with a crowbar. Inside, wrapped in straw, were neat rows of bottles marked with the Army seal. Real labels. Clear glass. Medicine that should have been in sick rooms days ago. No one spoke for a long moment. The silence did more than any sermon could have done. It moved from face to face, making each person stand beside the thing they had believed. Silas looked at the crate, then at the crowd, searching for the old fear he had always used like reins. But fear had shifted sides. This proves nothing, he said. Ayanna opened her pouch and placed the stamped leather strip beside the bottles. Caleb set the darker tin cup next to it, filled now with the bitter tea she had brewed for the sick. No, Caleb said quietly. It proves enough to start listening. Sheriff Bell took Silas by the arm. There was no struggle worth remembering, no grand noise, no heroic speech. Just one man's smile falling away while the town watched the shape of its mistake. Taza Black Moon moved to the crate, lifted one bottle, and handed it to Martha first. Then Ayanna poured tea into the cup for another mother waiting near the steps. One by one, people came forward. Some could not meet her eyes. Some whispered thanks too softly to be proud of. Ayanna accepted none of it like victory. She worked. Caleb stood near the hitching post, watching this woman give help to people who had nearly refused her humanity. When the sun broke through the clouds, it did not shine bright. It only touched the snow enough to make the street glitter, as if the whole town had been covered in something cold and was finally beginning to thaw. Spring did not arrive in Mercy Crossing all at once. It came the way forgiveness sometimes does, not with a trumpet, but with dripping eaves, soft mud, and the first thin grass showing where the snow had finally lost its grip. By April, the pass was open. By May, wagons moved again along the medicine road. Children who had lain pale beneath quilts were chasing each other past the water trough, their laughter sharp and bright in the clean air. Silas Crow was gone from town, taken east under Sheriff Bell's watch, and the store porch where he had smiled at people's fear now held crates of flour, coffee, and real medicine stacked in plain sight. Folks spoke differently after that winter. Not better all at once. People rarely changed that kindly, but they paused before old words. They looked longer before judging. And when Ayanna Black Moon crossed the street with her mother, hats came off in silence, awkward at first, then honest enough. Caleb Whitaker watched most of it from the edge of things, as he always had. He repaired harness, mended fence, rode home before supper, and told himself that a man who had lived alone for years should know how to keep doing it. Only his cabin argued with him. The second tin cup remained on the table, the darker one. Ayanna had left it there the morning she rode back with her people, saying nothing about it, only touching the rim once before stepping out into thawing snow. Caleb tried hanging it back on the high shelf. By sundown, he had taken it down again. Some emptiness, once named, would not go back to being quiet. On the first Sunday of May, he found a bundle tied to his porch rail with red thread. Inside were dried sage, a small pouch of tea leaves, and a strip of blue cloth folded clean. No note. None was needed. He stood there a long while with the bundle in his hands while the horses grazed beyond the fence and the mountains shone wet and blue in the distance. Then he heard riders. Not many. 2 horses only. Ayanna came up the north trail beside Ayanna Black Moon, her hair braided over one shoulder, her face calm in the way of someone who had made peace with a difficult road before taking it. Caleb stepped down from the porch. "Road's clear," he said. Ayanna looked toward the pass, where the last snow clung to the high shadows. Yes. Taza studied the cabin, the barn, the thin smoke lifting from the stovepipe. Then she placed one hand over her heart and nodded to Caleb. A house that kept life should not be left empty too long. She turned her horse without waiting for his answer and rode back toward the ridge, leaving her daughter beside the fence where winter had first brought her. Caleb held the porch rail, suddenly unsure of his own hands. "Your people will need you," he said. "They do." Ayanna's eyes moved to the cabin window. "Mercy Crossing may need me too." He gave a small nod, because hope frightened him more than any storm. "And what do you need?" For the first time, she smiled, not wide, not easy, but real enough to change the light around her. "A place where the cup is not put away." Caleb looked through the open door. 2 tin cups waited on the table, catching the morning sun. He walked inside, picked up the darker one, and set it beside the stove where it belonged now. Not hidden, not borrowed, not temporary. When he came back, Ayanna was on the porch. He did not reach for her. He did not dress the moment in pretty words. He only opened the door wider and said, "There is still a place at my table." She stepped across the threshold with the blue cloth in her hand, and outside, the spring wind moved through the yard without asking permission. From that day on, smoke rose from Caleb Whitaker's cabin in 2 steady lines, and folks passing the north road learned to lower their voices when they saw it, because some kinds of justice do not ride into town loud. They stay through the winter. They warm what the world left cold.